So here we go. So we will be discussing today the various learning theories and principles in training and development. Now, before we proceed kasi dun sa ating uh, steps in or procedures in the conduct of training and development, we have to first determine itong mga learning theories and principles. Later on, we will go. I'm going to explain why studying or having an extensive understanding of the various learning theories and principles would be able to create, an effective and even integrated and innovative training programs for our employees. Okay, so we have already discussed in Unit 1 yung purpose ng training, di ba? Ano ba ang purpose ng training? Dun sa ating previous lesson, we discussed, di ba, na yung training can play a key role in helping companies gain a competitive advantage, correct? And when we have also an effective training and development, we could successfully deal with various competitive challenges. And nagkaroon din tayo ng activity. We also research companies and organizations who had world-class training program and initiatives and presented how training played a crucial role in meeting their business objectives. And part also of what we tackle in Unit 1 is the training process. Okay? You still remember the training process? We also discussed yung ADDIE model of training process. And then before we proceed to in that topic, okay, in the discussion on the process of training, we have to become familiar first with the learning theories and principles. Because remember that the purpose of training is to help employees learn. Di ba? Yun yung purpose ng training. Okay? Tutulungan natin sila para sila ay matuto so that they could successfully perform their jobs. So today, we will be discussing 3 agendas in here. We will be expected that at the end of the unit, you will be able to distinguish the differences of the learning theories, explain the implication of these learning theories and principles for instructional design, and of course, i-outline natin yung learning process. So why do we have to study itong mga learning theories and principles? Because a training can only be effective if it promotes learning. Therefore, we need to know how and why people learn. Okay? So kailangan nating matutunan kung ano ba yung mga prinsipyo, kung paano natututo, okay, know and why, how and why people learn. Okay? So the question is, bakit importante ngayon na pag-aralan natin to? So the importance of training and the cost of training are obvious naman, di ba? Alam natin na importante ang training, tapos alam natin na magastos ang magpa-training and also to conduct different development programs. So the question forcing the executives in organizations that how organization can make this training effective or training programs more effective. So in this unit, we will be discussing the role of learning theories as guiding principles or as it will guide us in the development of effective training programs. So that makatulong tayo in the development of the skills, knowledge, and experiences of people for them to effectively perform their jobs. So in this session, we will be studying learning theories and principles, which means that an individual makes the organizational performance better by utilizing yung kanilang knowledge and skills. So, ang mangyayari dito, once we able to know how and why people learn, we could create training program that is effective, that will help employees build yung kanilang knowledge, skills, and experiences that is relevant to the job that they will perform or that they are performing. So this unit will highlight, yung importance and applications of learning theories and how these theories could prove to be of most could prove to be at most importance and paano siya magiging makatulong for training to be effective. Okay? So katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, training can only be effective if it promotes learning. So we need to know how and why people learn. So what are learning theories? Ano ba ang learning theories? Okay. So learning theories, alam naman natin kung ano ang theory. A theory is an explanation for why something occurs or how it occurs. So what are learning theories? Learning theories, pag sinasabi natin theory, di ba? The theory is an explanation for why something occurs or how it occurs. Okay? Yan yung sinabi ni Rasim. So she also defines that a learning theory as a theory, okay? Ang aim ng learning theory is to systematize and organize what is known about human learning. Okay? So, it helps us to understand both how knowledge is created and how people learn. Okay? So, dito natin makikita paano ba nakikreate yung knowledge sa isipan ng tao and how people will use that knowledge, store that knowledge sa kanyang utak. Okay? There are also authors, sabi ni Lefrancois 2019, that learning theory aims to systematize and organize what is known about human learning. So he argues that a robust learning theory seeks to explain behavior, to predict it, and to even shape or change yung learner's behavior. So by understanding learning theory, we will be able to deal with human behaviors and the various changes that occurs in behaviors and the effects of the environment on this behavior. So this various learning theory examines the human behavior and gives some instruction o yung mga conditions of learning. So by understanding itong mga theory na to, we will be able to prepare yung mga effective and proper conditions para maging effective yung learning ng ating mga participants during the training program. Okay. So lahat ng learning theories na to permeate the dimensions of training and it provides trainer with options to choose the one that is most appropriate dun sa kanilang training program. So depending upon the trainees and the training approaches, different learning theory may apply. Always remember that all learning theories carry some basic concepts that the trainer needs to understand, which will be more helpful in analyzing behavior and the learning process, particularly in training. So, kapag kasi tayo ay nag-design ng training, it helps to consider the influences that might be causing the learning to occur. So that's where theories of learning can be useful. Okay. So by understanding this theory, okay, itong mga theories na to sa learning na to, kasi they are meant to explain how a person or group kasi attains new knowledge, skills, and abilities. Therefore, an effective training in the organization is a challenge kasi and needs attention for professional trainers. So learning theory, by understanding learning theories, it will provide us a better deal of instruction and principles to us, the trainers, by utilizing them, and then they could make an analysis of individuals and can select the effective method of training. In short, understanding the learning theory or theories or principles is inevitable in learning. Kailangan nating magkaroon tayo ng understanding, okay, sa mga learning theories na to. So they are imperative in designing learning. Okay? Because as learning designers, our goal is to make sure that learning is relevant and aligned to the needs of our participants. Okay? Kasi nung nga agalay ginida tapos anda ma-feel nga dato importante para kanya da. Okay? And you will not be able to set the various conditions for them to effectively learn, hindi magiging beneficial ngayon yung dinesign mo na training and development program. Okay? So it is imperative that as training professionals and learning designers, you must understand the common theories of learning so that we will be able to make good choices and educated decisions regarding the learning interventions that we can integrate, okay, dun sa ating training design. Especially now that we are using technology, social media, and other methods. Okay. So by understanding itong different learning theories, we could integrate this into the training design and even to the training implementations. So all training professionals and learning designers must approach training in a way that is governed by one of the learning theories that we will be discussing in this unit. Okay? Kasi dito ang nangyayari when we choose a particular way to teach, it has consequences related to how people learn. And as learning designers, our goal is to make sure that learning is relevant and aligned to the needs of our audience. We also want to select and apply the right instructional strategies that help the audience achieve their goals. So once we become aware of the various learning theories, we can begin to understand the process of learning and even understand our beliefs about learning and challenge our assumptions around the methods and methodologies of learning. Okay? So, ito kasing learning design, it will, itong mga theories rather, okay, will provide us a basis to understand how people learn and a way to explain, describe, and analyze and even predict learning of our participants. In that sense, a theory will be able to help us to make more informal decisions around the design, development, and delivery of learning. Okay? So maraming mga learning theories na pag-uusapan natin ngayon. Okay? So etong mga theory na to have taught us deeply about the learning, and these are highly researched or they are being researched extensively. So ibig sabihin yan, binibigyan na tayo ng mga concepts, ng mga principles na pwede nating gamitin para magkaroon tayo ng napakaganda at effective na training program. Okay. So, learning theory offers a framework that will help us understand how information is going to be used and how knowledge is created and how learning takes place. So learning designers can apply these frameworks according to the different learning or according to the various learning objectives and the needs of the learner and make informed decisions about choosing the right instructional practices. Okay? So lahat kasi ng create natin ng mga training and programs, we follow the concept of learning design, and it must be based on learning theories because of the following things na sinabi ko kanina. Okay? Now the question is, or the question is, meron ba dito sa mga learning theories na to ay yung pinaka-the best? Okay? Is there a best learning theory? Okay, there is none. There is no one best learning theory because each theory offers a different way to look at learning and the essential ingredients that make learning happen. Okay, so, but by describing and using these various theories, it provides us lens, kasi lang lenses pa nagkita, okay? Perspective on how learning designers can create or learning designers can understand and describe the role of the learner, the role of the instructor, the teacher, or the facilitator, and how learning happens in different ways. So each theory has an influence and shape instructional practices and methods, and all the theories will continue to do so. Second is, different theories provide the context of learning. underlying motivation, and the methods of teaching. Okay, and this has implications for designing and delivering instruction. Okay, so different theories are best suited to different learning outcomes and different audience profiles or demographics. Okay. Therefore, since a theory comprises of facts and assumptions, learning designers must begin the design of training by identifying first the goal of the training and then select the right theoretical framework. I know you are familiar with the theoretical framework. Ay, wala pa kayong research? O hindi pa? Next sem pa lang, ano? Yung research ninyo. So, hindi pa kayo masyadong familiar sa theoretical framework. So, there are lots of learning theories out there, no? But there is none. Okay? None yung sinasabi natin na one size fits all thing. Okay? So, walang best learning theory. It depends on the situation. It depends on the objectives. It depends on the learner's profile or demographics. So, the learning and development team should investigate first the different tools and decide which ones suit the type of the training you need to deliver and the company culture that you are creating. Okay, so that's the reason why understanding learning theories and principles are relevant sa subject natin na training and development, and even in the training design, development, and implementation and evaluation of our training programs that you're going to offer to your organization. So now, let us define what is learning. How do we define learning? How do we define learning? So this is the definition that we're going to adapt here in our subject. That learning is a relatively permanent change in human behavior or in human capabilities that is not a result of growth processes. So these capabilities are related to specific learning outcomes. Later on, I'm going to show you what are these various learning outcomes. So pag sinasabi natin relatively permanent, okay? So makita mo yung word na relatively permanent, It is relatively permanent because the changing of behavior is not fixed. Pwede pang ma-develop yan, pwede pang magbago. It may change, lalong-lalo na kapag there is changes in nagbabago yan, it may change with the change of new knowledge, technology, and even yung experience, di ba? Once you become more experienced, nagbabago yung human capabilities mo. So whatever learned today, it is not permanent. Especially when new technology comes, new experiences are being gathered, and the learning may change. And that could also change the person's behavior. Diba? When you learn something new, it somehow changes your behavior. So learning is now being described as the process of having of having one's behavior, yung behavior ng tao na mo-modify, okay, more or less permanently. Okay? So nangyayari yan by experiences, consequences ng kanyang actions, and even through observation. Okay. So ano ba yung sinasabi natin dito na learning outcomes? Ano ba itong mga learning outcomes na to? Yung mga types of learning outcomes, meron tayong 5. We have verbal information, intellectual skills, motor skills, attitudes, and cognitive strategies. Okay. So pag sinasabi nating learning outcomes, these are measurable achievements that a learner will be able to understand after the learning is complete, which helps the learners understand the importance of information and what they will gain from their engagement with the learning activity. So we have here various definitions of learning outcomes. Ano? These are katulad ng ginagawa ng mga teachers natin, ano? Kapag nag-start sila ng klase, ng session. They are putting the learning outcomes or yung tinatawag natin na objectives. Okay? So ito yung mga descriptions of specific knowledge, skills, or expertise that the learner will get from a learning activity such as training session, seminar, course, or program. Okay? So creating a clear actionable and learning outcomes is an important part of the creation of training programs in organizations. So when we are developing training programs, both the management and the instructors need to be clear about kung ano ba yung kailangan maintindihan ng mga learners after completing yung kanilang learning path. Okay? Learning outcomes also play a key role in assessment and evaluation, making clear what knowledge learners should have upon completion of the learning activity. So kapag meron tayong well-written learning outcome, okay, yung ating mga learners will be able to apply their new knowledge in the real-world context rather than on the learner being able to recite the information or just put it into their memory. Okay. So the most useful learning outcomes includes verb. Later on, pag-uusapan natin to as we proceed to dun sa first step ng ating training process. Ano? So, the most useful learning outcomes include a verb that describes an observable action, a description of what the learner will be able to do, and under which conditions they will be able to do it, and the performance level they should be able to reach. Katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, we have 5 types of learning outcomes. So we have the verbal information, intellectual skills, motor skills, attitudes, and cognitive strategies. So when we look at the table, pag tignan natin itong table dito, yung mga types of learning outcomes and yung kanilang description of capability and some examples. Okay. So pag sinasabi natin verbal, this includes names, labels, facts, bodies of knowledge. Okay, yun yung mga kabilang dyan. So verbal information includes specialized knowledge that employees need in their jobs. Okay, for example, a manager must know the names of different types of equipment as well as the body of knowledge related to total quality management. Okay, example is ito yung mga performance standards, ano? State 3 reasons for following company safety procedures. So knowledge lang, verbal. State telling, describing. Okay. Then we have here intellectual skills. This includes concepts and rules. So these concepts and rules are critical to solve problems, serve customers, and even create products. So eto na, hindi ka na lang nag-state, nagtatel, nag-describe, but being able to generalize concepts and rules to solve problems and generate novel products. So meron ng tinatawag dito na analysis, okay, even problem solving, okay. And then another learning outcome is yung ating motor skills. When we say motor skills, it's not about driving a motorcycle, ano? But when we are describing motor skills, this includes coordination of physical movements. Okay. So for example, a telephone repair person must have the coordination and dexterity necessary to climb the ladders and telephone poles. So motor skills. Physical movements na. Okay. Or yung natawag natin na execution of a physical action with precision and timing. Then we have here attitudes. Attitudes naman are a combination of beliefs and feelings that predispose a person to behave a certain way. Okay? So, pag sinasabi ng attitude, it's more of choosing a personal course of action. Okay? So, pag sinasabi natin kasing attitude, this includes cognitive component. This includes your beliefs, your feeling, and the way the person intends to behave with regards to the subject of the attitude. Okay. So ano ba yung example ng work-related attitudes? In your BA24, these are being discussed in BA24, organizational behavior. Ano yung mga attitudes? Work-related attitudes. This includes job satisfaction, commitment to the organization, job involvement, and the rest. Okay? And we want that our employees or our members of the organization must possess, okay, positive attitude towards their work. So training programs may use to develop or change attitudes because attitudes have shown to be related to physical and mental withdrawal from work and even turnover and behaviors that impact the well-being of companies such as helping new employees, organizational citizenship behavior, and the rest, or even employee engagement is part of this learning outcome. And lastly, we have here cognitive strategies. Okay? So we have here, pag sinasabi natin cognitive strategies, it regulates the process of learning. They relate to the learner's decision regarding what information to attend, how to remember, and how to solve problems. So this is now how a certain individual manage their own thinking and learning processes. So minsan, dito na nagkakaiba ang ating mga participants or ating mga learners because each individual has their own or they could set their own cognitive strategies. Okay? So those are the various learning outcomes. Now, let us proceed to the learning theories. Do you have questions so far?